The wolf wouldn't come out right. Caleb Rourke sat hunched over his workbench, carving knife gripped tight enough to make his knuckles white. The pine block in his hand should have been taking shape by now. Ears, snout, the lean muscle of a predator built for survival. Instead, it looked like something drowning, desperate, wrong. He threw it across the cabin. It clattered against the far wall, joining a graveyard of abandoned attempts. 7 wolves, all failures, all staring at him with half-formed faces that looked too much like accusation. Outside, the wind screamed. Montana in late November wasn't kind. It didn't ease you into winter. It grabbed you by the throat and didn't let go until spring. Most people knew better than to live this high in the Rockies, this far from anything resembling civilization. Most people had survival instincts. Caleb had something else. He stood, joints popping, and crossed to the window. Nothing out there but white. Snow piled 3 feet high against the cabin walls, and the pines beyond bent low under the weight of ice. The sky had that yellow-gray look that meant more was coming, always more. He was 42 years old and looked 50. Hard living did that. Carved lines into a man's face the same way he carved wood, turned skin to leather, turned eyes to something flat and distant. His beard had gone more gray than brown, wild and unkempt because there was nobody to impress and nothing worth the effort. Inside the cabin, the silence was thick enough to choke on. 1 room, stone fireplace, bed in the corner, table, 2 chairs, though he'd only ever used one. Shelves lined with supplies, jerky, beans, coffee, ammunition, everything a man needed to survive alone, everything a man needed to stay that way. Caleb grabbed his coat, elk-hide, thick and heavy, and stepped outside. The cold hit him like a fist, 20 below, maybe colder, the kind of temperature that could kill you in minutes if you weren't careful. He'd been careful for 15 years, careful, methodical, and utterly alone. The barn stood 50 yards from the cabin, connected by a rope he'd strung between the 2 buildings. In a whiteout, that rope was the difference between finding your way back and freezing to death 10 feet from your door. He'd learned that lesson the hard way his first winter up here, when he'd gotten turned around and spent 4 hours clawing through drifts before stumbling onto his own porch. Iron nickered when Caleb pushed through the barn door. The horse was a massive bay gelding, 17 hands of muscle and bad attitude. Caleb had found him half dead in a ravine 7 years back, gunshot wound, rider gone, bleeding out into the snow. Most men would have put a bullet in the animal's head and called it mercy. Caleb had spent 3 weeks nursing him back to health, feeding him by hand, cleaning the wound twice a day. They'd understood each other from the start. "Yeah, I know," Caleb muttered, grabbing a brush and working it through Iron's coat. "Getting worse out there." The horse stamped, ears swiveling toward the barn door. Caleb paused. "What?" Iron's nostrils flared. Animals knew things. Caleb had lived in the wild long enough to trust that knowledge. When Iron got tense, there was usually a reason. Mountain lion. Bear coming out of hibernation early. Once, a grizzly had circled the cabin for 3 days, and Iron had refused to settle until the threat moved on. But this felt different. Caleb moved to the door and listened. Wind. Just wind, except there. Beneath the howl. Something else. A rhythm that didn't match the storm. He grabbed his rifle from where it leaned against the wall and stepped outside. The world had gone white. Snow fell so thick he could barely see the cabin. He moved along the rope, weapon ready, every sense straining against the storm. Nothing. He was halfway back to the barn when Iron screamed. Not a whinny. A scream, high-pitched, panicked, the sound a horse makes when death is close. Caleb ran. He burst through the barn door to find Iron rearing, hooves smashing against the stall, eyes rolling white. The horse was trying to kick through the wall, trying to escape something that wasn't there. Easy, easy. It took 20 minutes to calm him down. 20 minutes of low words and steady hands while the horse shook and sweated despite the cold. By the time Iron finally settled, Caleb's arms ached and his voice was hoarse. He stood there breathing hard, trying to figure out what had spooked an animal that had faced down a grizzly without flinching. That's when he heard it again. Not beneath the wind this time. Above it. A sound that didn't belong, metallic, discordant, like something breaking. Caleb grabbed a lantern and pushed back into the storm. The crash site was a half-mile down the mountain. He almost missed it. just a dark shape jutting from a snowdrift, barely visible through the white curtain of the blizzard. But as he got closer, the shape took form. Stagecoach. Overturned, smashed, one wheel still spinning slowly in the wind. Caleb stopped, rifle raised. Nobody traveled through these mountains in November. The passes closed in October, and anyone with sense was already hunkered down in the valley towns, waiting for spring. But here it was. A coach. Expensive by the looks of it, with gilt trim and leather fittings that had no business being this far from civilization. He approached slowly. 3 bodies. The driver, throat cut, frozen in the position he'd fallen. 2 guards, both shot, their blood forming dark puddles in the snow that had already started to freeze. No horses. They'd either run or been taken. The coach door hung open, swinging in the wind. Caleb had seen death before. Lots of it. A man didn't survive 15 years alone in the mountains without watching things die. But this wasn't nature. This was human, deliberate. He checked the bodies anyway. All dead. Hours dead, judging by the cold. He should have left. Should have turned around, gone back to the cabin, forgotten he ever saw this. These weren't his problems. He'd stopped caring about other people's problems a long time ago, right around the time he'd buried his wife and the child she'd died trying to give him. He turned to go. That's when he saw the hand, pale, small, reaching out from beneath a pile of blankets and luggage that had spilled from the coach. Hell! Caleb knelt and started digging. Fabric, more fabric, a trunk, a carpet bag. And beneath it all, a woman. She was young, mid-20s maybe. Dark hair plastered to her face, lips blue, skin the color of old paper. She wore a dress that probably cost more than Caleb's entire cabin, all silk and lace and pearl buttons that were useless against the cold. She wasn't breathing. He should have left her, should have walked away. Dead was dead and there was nothing to be done about it. But his hand moved anyway, pressing against her throat, and felt a pulse, weak, faint, like a candle about to go out. But there. Damn it! Caleb scooped her up. She weighed nothing, just bone and fabric, and started running. The cabin was chaos. He kicked the door open and laid her on the bed, then scrambled to build up the fire. The embers had died down to almost nothing, and the temperature inside was barely warmer than outside. He threw on logs, kindling, anything that would burn until flames roared up the chimney. The woman didn't move. He stripped off her wet clothes, no room for modesty when someone was dying, and wrapped her in every blanket he owned. Her skin was ice. Her breathing so shallow he had to lean close to feel it. Hypothermia. Advanced. Maybe too far gone. Caleb had seen it kill strong men, had seen trappers freeze to death in their sleep, their bodies simply giving up when the cold got too deep. This woman was small, delicate, probably hadn't eaten in days. The odds were bad. He heated water and tried to get some down her throat. Most of it dribbled out. He rubbed her hands, her feet, trying to get circulation back. Nothing. Hours passed. The storm outside reached a fever pitch, wind slamming against the cabin walls hard enough to make the whole structure shake. Snow piled higher. The world disappeared into white noise. Inside, Caleb worked. He'd saved 1 life in these mountains. Irons. He'd failed to save 2 others. He could still see them sometimes when he closed his eyes. Sarah, her face twisted in pain. The baby that never took a breath. The frozen ground that had been too hard to dig deep enough. He couldn't do it again. Couldn't watch someone die while he stood there useless. So he kept working. Changed the blankets when they got damp from her body heat starting to return. Kept the fire roaring. Heated stones and placed them around her. Talked to her, low, constant words that didn't mean anything but filled the silence. Come on, fight. You survived a crash, survived however many hours in that snow. Don't quit now. Her eyelids flickered. Caleb leaned closer. That's it. Come back. She coughed, wet, painful. Her eyes opened halfway, brown, confused, terrified. Where? The word came out as barely a whisper. Safe, Caleb said. You're safe. Her eyes rolled back. She was out again, but she was breathing stronger now, deeper. The color starting to come back to her lips. Caleb sat back, exhausted. Outside, the storm raged on. Check. She woke, screaming. Caleb jerked up from where he'd fallen asleep in the chair, hand reaching for the rifle before his brain caught up. The woman was sitting upright in bed, blankets clutched to her chest, eyes wide and wild. She was looking around the cabin like a trapped animal, breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Hey, hey, you're okay. She spun toward him, and for a second he thought she might bolt, but there was nowhere to go. One door, one room, and outside the storm was still howling. Where am I? Her voice was rough, damaged from the cold. My cabin, about 15 miles north of Clancy Peak. Where's... She stopped, swallowed. The coach. Where's the coach? Gone. Wrecked. I found you buried in the snow. The others? Caleb shook his head. Something collapsed behind her eyes. She turned away, shoulders shaking. Not crying, just shaking, like the weight of it was too much to carry. He gave her space. Stood and moved to the stove where he had coffee going. Poured a cup and set it on the table. When you're ready. She didn't move for a long time. Just sat there, wrapped in blankets, staring at nothing. Finally, she reached for the coffee with trembling hands. Took a sip. Winced. It's strong, Caleb said. It's terrible. Yeah, well, I don't get a lot of complaints. She looked at him then, really looked. Taking in the wild beard, the hard face, the rifle leaning against the wall within easy reach. Her eyes narrowed. Did you do it? Do what? The attack. She gestured vaguely. Did you kill them? Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest. If I'd killed them, you wouldn't have woken up. Then who did? Don't know. Don't care. You don't... She laughed, bitter and sharp. 3 people are dead. How can you not care? Because caring doesn't change it. They're dead. You're alive. That's where we are. She stared at him like he was speaking another language, like the concept of not caring was so foreign she couldn't process it. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated. Elena Whitlock. Caleb Rourke. Well, Mr. Rourke, I need to get to Helena as soon as possible. Caleb almost laughed. Not happening. Excuse me? Storm's not done. Won't be for days, maybe a week. And even when it clears, the passes are closed. Nobody's going anywhere until spring. The color drained from her face. That's months from now. 4, maybe 5. No, I can't. I have to get to Helena. I have to. She stood up too fast. The blankets fell. She swayed, legs buckling. Caleb caught her before she hit the floor. Easy. You nearly died. You need rest. I need to go. She pushed against him, but there was no strength behind it. You don't understand. I have to. You have to survive. That's all that matters right now. She looked up at him, and he saw it. The desperation. The fear. Whatever she was running from, it was worse than the cold. Worse than the crash. Maybe worse than death. Please, she whispered. Caleb helped her back to the bed. Sleep. We'll figure out the rest later. There's nothing to figure out. I can't stay here. You don't have a choice. Her jaw tightened. There's always a choice. Not this time. She turned away from him, pulling the blankets tight around her shoulders, shutting him out. Caleb moved back to his chair, picked up the piece of pine he'd been carving, the wolf that wouldn't come out right. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, 2 strangers sat in silence, trapped together by circumstance and snow. 3 days passed like a standoff. Elena stayed on one side of the cabin. Caleb stayed on the other. They orbited around each other like hostile planets, speaking only when necessary, each pretending the other wasn't there. It didn't work. The cabin was too small. Every sound echoed. Every movement drew attention. When she shifted in the bed, he heard it. When he worked at the stove, she watched. The silence between them grew thick and uncomfortable, filled with unasked questions and unwanted proximity. Caleb hated it. He'd built this life specifically to avoid this. People, conversation, the messy complication of caring about anyone other than himself. 15 years of perfect isolation, shattered because he'd made the mistake of checking for a pulse. He should have left her in the snow. But watching her now, sitting by the window, wrapped in blankets, staring out at the white emptiness, he knew he couldn't have. She was thinner than when he'd found her. not eating enough, picking at the venison stew and cornbread he made like it was poisoned. Her hands shook when she thought he wasn't looking. Her eyes had dark circles that had nothing to do with the cold. On the fourth day, she broke first. "Why do you live up here?" Caleb looked up from the knife he was sharpening. "Because I want to." "Nobody wants to live alone in the middle of nowhere." "I do." She turned from the window. "What are you running from?" "Nothing. Everyone's running from something. Not me." "Liar." The word hung in the air between them. Caleb set down the knife carefully. "You want to talk about running? Fine. Let's talk about you. Rich girl, expensive dress, traveling in November through closed mountain passes. What were you running from?" Elena's face went carefully blank. "I wasn't running." "Now who's the liar?" Her eyes flashed. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're scared. Know you'd rather risk freezing to death than stay put. Know you're desperate enough to ask a stranger for help. That sound about right?" She stood up, blankets falling away. She'd been wearing his spare clothes, a shirt that hung to her knees, pants rolled up at the ankles. She looked ridiculous and furious. "You want to know what I was running from?" "Fine. I was running from a marriage. A business arrangement disguised as a wedding. My father gambled away everything we had, and the only way to pay his debts was to sell me to the highest bidder. Victor Hale, railroad baron, 53 years old, never been married because he likes them young and easy to control. So yes, Mr. Rourke, I was running, and I'll keep running until I'm so far away he can't find me." Caleb stared at her. She stared back, chest heaving, defiance written across every inch of her face. "Well," she demanded, "aren't you going to tell me I'm being dramatic? That marriage is an honor? That I should be grateful?" "No," Caleb said quietly. "I'm going to tell you that you picked a hell of a way to escape." Something in her face crumpled. "I didn't have another choice. He was coming to collect me. I had 3 days. I took everything I could carry and bought passage on the first coach heading west. I thought—" She laughed, bitter. "I thought I could make it to California, start over, disappear. Instead, you ended up here." "Instead, I ended up here." She sat back down, all the fight draining out of her. "And now I'm trapped. When spring comes, he'll find me. He always finds what belongs to him. You don't belong to anyone. Tell him that." Caleb picked up his knife again. "If he comes here, I will." She looked at him, surprised. "You'd fight him?" "I'd shoot him. Less talking that way." For the first time since she'd woken up, Elena smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. "Thank you," she said quietly. Caleb nodded and went back to sharpening his knife. Outside, the storm continued, but inside, something had shifted. Elena adapted faster than Caleb expected. By the end of the first week, she'd stopped acting like a guest and started acting like a survivor. She learned to feed the fire, to melt snow for water, to cook the simple meals Caleb made, venison, beans, the occasional rabbit when he could trap one. She wasn't good at it, burned more than she cooked. But she tried, and Caleb, reluctantly, grudgingly, started teaching her. "You're choking the axe," he said, watching her struggle with a piece of firewood. "I'm what?" "Your hands. You're gripping too tight. Relax. Let the weight of the axe do the work." She tried again. The wood split clean down the middle. Elena looked at the 2 pieces like she'd just performed magic. "I did it." Again. She split 4 more pieces before her arms gave out. Caleb took over, working through the pile with the kind of efficiency that came from years of practice. Elena watched, studying his movements. "How long have you been up here?" she asked. 15 years. "That's a long time to be alone." "That's the point." "Don't you miss people?" "No." "Not even a little?" Caleb drove the axe into the chopping block and turned to face her. "You want the truth? People are messy. They want things. Need things. They get close, and then they leave, or they die, or they change into someone you don't recognize anymore. Up here, it's simple. You work, you survive. You don't have to care about anyone but yourself." Elena was quiet for a moment. "That sounds lonely. Lonely is safe." "Is it?" The question hit harder than it should have. Caleb grabbed another log. "Get inside, you'll freeze." She didn't move. "What happened to you?" "Nothing." "Something did?" Something that made you think being alone was better than get inside. She went. Caleb kept chopping until his arms burned and sweat froze to his skin despite the cold. Kept working until the pile was gone and the anger that had flared up settled back down into the familiar numbness he'd learned to live with. When he finally came back inside, Elena was at the stove, attempting to make coffee. It smelled burned. "I'm sorry," she said without turning around. "I shouldn't have pushed. Forget it. I just—" She stopped, started again. "I understand. About running. About wanting to get away from everything that hurts. I understand." Caleb hung his coat by the door. "Yeah, I know." They drank the terrible coffee in silence. The second week brought a break in the storm. Caleb woke to sunlight, actual sunlight, streaming through the window. The wind had stopped. The world outside had gone quiet. He got up and looked out. Blue sky, blinding white snow, and in the distance the peaks of the Rockies standing sharp and clear against the horizon. "Is it over?" Elena appeared beside him, hope written across her face. "For now. Can we—" "No." Her face fell. "Look," Caleb pointed toward the pass. "See how the snow sits? That's 20 feet deep in places. And see that ridge? Avalanche waiting to happen. One loud noise, one wrong step, and the whole thing comes down. Nobody's traveling through there until spring. But the sky is clear. For now. This is just a pause. Another storm will hit in a few days, maybe sooner." Elena turned away from the window. "So I'm still trapped." "We both are." "Yes, but you chose this, I didn't." She was right, and Caleb didn't have an answer for that. The clear weather lasted 3 days. 3 days of Elena pacing the cabin like a caged animal, staring out at the mountains like she could will a path through them. 3 days of tension building, of her frustration filling the small space until it felt like the walls were closing in. On the third night, she finally exploded. "I can't do this!" She threw the wooden spoon she'd been using into the pot of stew, splashing broth across the stove. "I can't just sit here waiting for spring while he's out there looking for me. I can't." "You can," Caleb said evenly. "Because the alternative is death. Maybe that's better than going back to him." "You don't mean that." "How would you know what I mean? You don't know me. You don't know what he's like, what he'll do when he finds me." Her voice cracked. "He'll kill me. Maybe not right away, but eventually. And it'll look like an accident, a fall, a fever, something nobody questions because he's rich and powerful, and I'm just—" She stopped, pressed her hands to her face. Caleb stood. "Elena, just don't." She grabbed her coat and went outside. Caleb let her go. Gave her space. Understood the need to rage at something, even if that something was the indifferent wilderness. 10 minutes passed. 15. Caleb looked out the window. Elena stood in the middle of the clearing, face turned toward the sky, arms wrapped around herself. Not moving, just standing there in the cold like she was trying to disappear into it. He should leave her alone. Should let her work through whatever she was feeling on her own. But something pulled him outside anyway. She didn't turn when he approached. "I thought marriage would be different," she said quietly. I don't know what I thought. That I'd have a choice. That I'd meet someone and fall in love and it would be like the stories. Stupid, right?" "No. My mother died when I was 12. My father started gambling when I was 15. By the time I was 20, we'd lost everything except the house. And then he lost that too." She laughed without humor. "Victor offered to clear the debts if I married him. Offered my father a job. Security. All it cost was me." "Your father agreed?" "He cried. Said he was sorry. Said he didn't have another choice." She finally turned to look at Caleb. "Everyone keeps saying that. No choice. Like we're all just powerless against whatever life throws at us. But you had a choice. You chose this. So tell me, how do you do it? How do you choose to be alone and not regret it every single day?" Caleb was quiet for a long time. "I had a wife," he said finally. "Sarah. We were young, stupid in love, built a life together down in the valley. She got pregnant, and we were happy. Happier than I thought anyone had a right to be." He stopped, The words felt like pulling nails. Something went wrong. The birth. The midwife couldn't stop the bleeding. I rode for the doctor, but by the time we got back, he couldn't finish. Didn't need to. Elena's eyes filled. Caleb. I buried them both the next day. Couldn't dig deep enough because the ground was frozen, so I covered them as best I could and walked away. Burned the house. Burned everything that reminded me of them. Came up here because I couldn't stand being around people who'd look at me with pity, who'd tell me time heals all wounds, who'd expect me to move on like it never happened. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made my choice. Chose the mountains over people. Chose silence over pain. And yeah, I regret it every single day, but I'm still here, still breathing. That's more than they got. Elena stepped closer. Is that why you saved me? Because you couldn't save them? The question landed like a punch. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman who'd crashed into his life uninvited, who'd challenged him, pushed him, forced him to feel things he'd spent 15 years trying to bury. Maybe, he admitted. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, small against his scarred palm. Thank you, she said, for saving me, for telling me, for all of it. Caleb squeezed her hand once, then let go. We should get inside, temperature's dropping. They walked back together, and for the first time since Elena had arrived, the silence between them felt comfortable. The routine settled in after that. Mornings, Caleb would check on iron and split wood while Elena made breakfast, which got slightly less terrible with each attempt. Afternoons, they'd work on cabin maintenance, or Caleb would teach her how to set snares, how to read animal tracks in the snow, how to survive in a place that wanted you dead. Evenings, they'd sit by the fire and talk. Elena told him about growing up in Boston, about her mother, who taught her to read and play piano and see the world as something beautiful instead of cruel, about the slow collapse of her father after the death, the gambling, the debt collectors who'd started showing up at their door. Caleb told her about the valley, about building the house with his own hands, about Sarah's laugh, the way she'd hum while cooking, the dreams they'd had for the child they'd never gotten to meet. It hurt to talk about, but it also felt lighter, like sharing the weight made it easier to carry. Do you think you'll ever go back? Elena asked one night. To the valley? No. Why not? Nothing there for me anymore. Maybe not the same things, but there could be new things, new people. Caleb stared into the fire. I'm not built for people anymore. I don't believe that. Why not? Because you're here, with me, talking, teaching, caring whether I live or die. That's not someone who's given up on people. I didn't have a choice. You were dying. There's always a choice, Elena said, throwing his own words back at him. You could have left me in the snow, but you didn't. That means something. It means I'm an idiot. She smiled. Maybe. But you're my idiot. The words hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than either of them was ready to acknowledge. Caleb stood abruptly. I'm checking on iron. Caleb, be back in a minute. He stepped outside into the cold, needing distance, needing space to think. But the truth followed him anyway. He was starting to care. About Elena. About what happened to her. About whether she smiled or cried or made it through another day. And caring was the one thing he'd sworn never to do again. The next storm hit on a Tuesday. Caleb had been expecting it, had felt it building in the air, seen the way iron got restless, noticed the birds disappearing from the trees. But Elena wasn't prepared. The wind came first, then the snow. Then the temperature dropped so fast the water in their bucket froze solid in less than an hour. Elena stood at the window, watching the world disappear. It's worse than before, she said. Yeah. How long will this one last? Don't know. Could be days, could be weeks. She turned to look at him. And if it's weeks, what do we do? Same thing we've been doing. Wait. I'm tired of waiting. I know. She crossed to where he sat at the table, working on another carving. This one was different, not a wolf, something softer, a bird in flight. What is it? She asked. Robin. Sarah used to love them, said they meant spring was coming. Elena sat down across from him. Can I try? Caleb handed her a knife and a fresh piece of pine. Start with something simple. Just make cuts until you see the shape. She worked in silence for a while, brow furrowed in concentration. The shape emerging from the wood didn't look like anything recognizable, but she kept going, determined. Tell me more about her, Elena said. About Sarah. Why? Because I want to know. Because talking about her seems to help. Because, she paused. Because I like hearing you talk about things you love. Caleb set down his knife. She had red hair, he said slowly. Curly, wild. She hated it. Spent hours trying to tame it, but it never worked. I loved it. Loved how it caught the light. How it smelled like lavender because she'd make soap from the plants she grew. She sounds beautiful. She was. Inside and out. Kind, patient, better than I deserved. I doubt that. You didn't know me then. I was angry, reckless, got into fights, drank too much, didn't think about tomorrow. She saw something in me worth saving, spent 2 years convincing me I could be better, and for a while I was. You still are. Caleb shook his head. I'm broken, Elena. 15 years up here, and I'm still broken. Still angry, still can't figure out how to be anything else. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. You saved my life. Took me in. Taught me how to survive. That's not broken. That's everything. He looked at her hand on his, small, warm, real. Elena, the window shattered. Glass exploded inward as something smashed through, heavy, fast, lethal. Caleb threw himself across the table, knocking Elena to the floor as the object embedded itself in the far wall. An axe. His axe. The one he'd left outside by the chopping block. Caleb grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, staying low. Outside, through the snow and wind, he saw them. 3 riders. Dark shapes against the white, moving toward the cabin. No, Elena whispered. No, no, no. You know them? He found me. Victor found me. Caleb's jaw tightened. Get to the corner, behind the bed. Don't move. Caleb, now. She scrambled to the corner, terror written across her face. Caleb checked his rifle. 6 rounds. He had more ammunition in the box by the door, but if this turned into a fight, 6 might not be enough. The riders stopped 50 feet from the cabin. One of them dismounted, tall, well-dressed even in the cold, moving with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Victor Hale. He walked toward the cabin like he owned it, like he owned the whole mountain. Elena, his voice carried over the wind, smooth and cultured. I know you're in there. Come out. Let's talk about this like civilized people. Caleb moved to the door, rifle ready. She's not coming out, he called back. Victor stopped. And who might you be? Nobody you need to know. Ah, the hermit. Yes, I heard about you, the ghost in the mountains, the man who wanted to be left alone. Victor smiled. Well, I'm afraid I can't do that. See, you have something that belongs to me. She doesn't belong to anyone. Legally, she does. We're engaged. She signed a contract. Ran away before the wedding, but that doesn't change the facts. Facts change when she doesn't want you. Victor's smile faded. This isn't your concern, friend. Walk away. Forget you ever saw her. I'll make it worth your while. No. No? Victor's voice hardened. Do you have any idea who I am? What I'm capable of? I could buy this entire mountain. Buy you. One word from me and you'll disappear like you never existed. You're welcome to try. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Victor gestured and the other 2 riders dismounted, both armed, both moving to flank the cabin. Caleb's finger found the trigger. Last chance, Victor called. Send her out, or we come in. Come ahead, Victor nodded, and the world exploded into violence. The first shot punched through the doorframe 6 inches from Caleb's head. He dropped, rolled, came up firing. The rifle kicked hard against his shoulder, once, twice. The man on the left went down screaming, clutching his leg. The one on the right dove behind the woodpile. Victor didn't move, just stood there in the snow, watching. Impressive, he called out. But you can't win this. My men are experienced, trained. You're just one man. Caleb didn't answer. He was already moving, staying low, making his way to the window. Outside, the wounded man was trying to crawl toward his horse, leaving a red trail behind him. The other one was pinned behind the woodpile, occasionally popping up to take wild shots that went nowhere close. "Elena," Victor tried again. "Please, be reasonable. I've come all this way for you, through a blizzard, through mountains that should have killed us. Doesn't that mean something?" From her corner, Elena's voice rang out, stronger than Caleb expected. "It means you're insane." "I'm persistent. There's a difference." "You're a monster." Victor's expression hardened. "I'm a man who keeps what's his. You signed a contract, Elena, made promises. Your father made promises. And I always, always collect on my debts." Caleb fired again. The shot splintered the woodpile, sending the hidden gunman scrambling for new cover. 3 rounds left. He needed to make them count. "This is your last warning," Victor said. "Send her out now, or I burn that cabin to the ground with both of you inside." "Try it." Victor smiled. It was the coldest thing Caleb had ever seen, emptier than the wind, more lifeless than the frozen bodies he'd found in that stagecoach. "As you wish." The man behind the woodpile pulled something from his coat. Even through the snow, Caleb recognized it. A torch, already lit. "No!" The gunman threw it. The torch arced through the air, spinning end over end, trailing smoke and flame. It hit the cabin roof and stuck there, wedged between the logs. Within seconds, the dry wood caught. Fire spread fast, unnaturally fast. They'd soaked the torch in something, oil, alcohol, whatever burned hot and quick. Smoke started seeping through the ceiling. "Caleb!" Elena's voice cracked with panic. He didn't have time to think, just moved. Grabbed the water bucket, half frozen but still liquid, and threw the contents at the spreading flames. It helped. Barely. The fire slowed but didn't stop. Another torch came through the broken window. This one landed on the floor, right next to the bed. The blankets caught immediately, flames climbing toward the rafters. "Out!" Caleb grabbed Elena's arm. "We have to go out." "They'll kill us." "They'll kill us if we stay." He threw open the door and fired blind into the snow. 2 shots, his last 2, just to make them duck. Then he pulled Elena through, half dragging her toward the barn. Gunfire erupted behind them. Something hot whipped past Caleb's ear. Another shot kicked up snow at his feet. Elena stumbled, and for one terrible second he thought she'd been hit, but then she was up again, running, hand locked in his. They made it to the barn door. Iron was losing his mind inside, rearing, kicking, eyes rolling white from the smoke and gunfire. Caleb shoved Elena toward the tack room. "Stay down!" He moved to Iron's stall, hands already working the latch. The horse tried to bolt the second the door opened, nearly trampling him. Caleb grabbed the halter, fighting to control 1,500 pounds of terrified animal. "Easy, easy!" Iron calmed just enough for Caleb to throw a saddle over his back. No time for proper tacking, no time for anything except survival. He yanked the cinch tight and turned to Elena. "Get on." "What about you?" "Just get on." She climbed up, awkward and scared, clutching the saddle horn with white knuckles. Caleb swung up behind her, one arm wrapping around her waist to keep her secure. "Hold on." He kicked Iron hard. The horse exploded out of the barn like a bullet, hooves throwing snow in massive plumes. Behind them, the cabin burned. Ahead, 2 shapes moved to block their path. Victor's remaining gunmen and Victor himself, both mounted now. "Stop them!" Victor's voice cut through the chaos. The gunman raised his rifle. Caleb turned Iron hard left toward the tree line. The shot went wide. Another followed, closer this time. Close enough that Caleb felt the wind of it passing. Elena screamed. They hit the trees at full gallop, branches whipping past, snow exploding around them. Iron ran like he was born for this, sure-footed even on treacherous ground, finding paths through the forest that Caleb wouldn't have seen. Behind them, hoofbeats followed. Victor wasn't giving up. Caleb pushed Iron harder, urging him up the mountainside. It was suicide. The snow was deep, the slope steep, avalanche danger everywhere. But staying low meant staying visible, meant making this a straight chase, and Victor's horses were fresh while Iron had been cooped up for weeks. They needed an advantage. The mountain would give them one, if it didn't kill them first. Higher they climbed, Iron's breath coming in great plumes of steam. Elena buried her face against Caleb's chest, arms wrapped around him like he was the only solid thing in a world gone mad. The hoofbeats behind them grew fainter. Caleb risked a glance back. 2 riders, maybe 300 yards down, struggling through drifts that came up to their horses' chests. Iron's size and strength were paying off. He could power through snow that would stop a smaller mount. But they couldn't run forever. Caleb steered Iron toward a rocky outcrop he knew from his hunting trips, a natural shelter carved into the mountainside by wind and time. It wasn't much, but it was something. A place to catch their breath, to figure out what the hell came next. They reached it just as Iron's strength started to flag. Caleb pulled him to a stop, both of them breathing hard. Elena slid off the saddle and immediately collapsed into the snow, shaking so badly her teeth chattered. "Are you hit?" Caleb had dropped beside her, hands already checking for wounds. No, just scared. We're safe. For now." "Safe?" She laughed, high and brittle. "They just burned down your home, shot at us. How is any of this safe?" "Because we're alive. That's all that matters." She looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. But they didn't have time for breakdowns or panic attacks. Victor was still out there, still hunting, and this outcrop wouldn't hide them for long. Caleb checked Iron. The horse was exhausted but uninjured. Good. They'd need him again soon. "Why won't he stop?" Elena's voice was small, lost. "What did I do that was so terrible he'd rather kill me than let me go?" "It's not about you. It's about control, about winning." Caleb stripped off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. Men like him don't see people. They see possessions. And they don't like it when their possessions get ideas about freedom. My father promised me to him, sold me like livestock. Your father was desperate and stupid. Doesn't make it right. But it's legal. Victor has the law on his side, the contract. To hell with the contract. You're not a thing to be bought and sold. Elena looked at him, something fierce and grateful shining through the fear in her eyes. "Then what do? We can't run forever. We have no food, no supplies, nowhere to go. And he'll just keep coming." She was right, and Caleb knew it. They were backed into a corner with winter on all sides and death closing in. No cabin to return to. No safe place to hide. Just 2 people and a horse against the combined forces of wealth, power, and a mountain that didn't care who lived or died. Caleb looked out at the landscape, white and vast and merciless. Then he looked back at Elena and made a decision. "We fight." "What?" "We stop running, we turn around, and we fight." "Are you insane? There are 3 of them." "2, Caleb corrected. "I hit one in the leg, he's not chasing anyone." 2 trained gunmen and a man with unlimited money versus us. Those aren't good odds. "No, they're not." Caleb moved to Iron and started checking the saddle. "But they're the only odds we've got. We keep running, we die. Exposure, starvation, getting picked off when we're too weak to fight back. Or we make a stand now while we still have strength. On what grounds?" This is his word against ours. His money against nothing. "On the grounds that you don't want to marry him. That should be enough." "Should be. Isn't." Caleb turned to face her fully. "Then we make it enough. One way or another, this ends today. Either we walk away free or we don't walk away at all." "Yeah." Elena stood up slowly. Her whole body was shaking, from cold, from fear, from the weight of what he was suggesting. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. "Okay. Okay? I'm tired of running, tired of being scared. If I'm going to die, I'd rather die fighting than die running." Caleb felt something shift in his chest. Pride, maybe. Or respect. This woman who'd shown up half-frozen and helpless had grown steel in her spine somewhere along the way. "We'll need weapons," he said. "You lost your rifle." "I know where we can get another one." Elena's eyes widened. "The cabin." "It's burning, but the stone fireplace won't. My spare rifle is mounted above it. If we can get to it before the whole structure collapses, that's suicide." "You have a better idea?" She didn't. Caleb helped her back onto Iron. This time when he swung up behind her, she leaned into him instead of staying rigid with fear. Trust. She was starting to trust him. He just hoped he could keep her alive long enough for that trust to matter. They made their way back down the mountain slowly, carefully. Caleb kept them in the trees, using the forest as cover. No sign of Victor or his man. Either they'd lost the trail or they were waiting. Caleb bet on waiting. The cabin came into view through the pines. It was still burning, but slower now. Most of the roof had collapsed, and the walls were starting to sag inward. Smoke poured into the gray sky like a funeral pyre. 15 years of isolation, of carefully built solitude, gone in less than an hour. Caleb felt something twist in his gut. Not grief exactly, more like displacement, like watching a part of himself burn away. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered. "For what?" "This. All of this. If you just left me in the snow, then you'd be dead and I'd still be alone. Don't apologize for surviving." He pulled Iron to a stop in the tree line and studied the clearing. No horses, no men. Just the burning cabin and fresh snow already starting to cover the tracks from their earlier flight. Too quiet. "They're here," Elena said, reading his thoughts. "Yeah." "Where?" "Don't know, but they're watching, waiting for us to come back." "So what do we do?" Caleb climbed down from the saddle. "You stay here with Iron. I'm going in." "Alone?" "Someone needs to hold the horse. If things go bad, you ride. Don't look back. Just ride as far and fast as you can." "I'm not leaving you." "Elena, us?" "No." She slid off Iron and stood facing him, jaw set. "I'm done being left behind, done being the helpless woman who needs protecting. You go in there, I go with you. This isn't about being helpless, it's about you trying to save me again. I know, but I don't need saving. I need a weapon and a chance to fight back. So either we do this together, or I go in alone." Caleb stared at her, saw the determination, the fear underneath it, yes, but also something harder, something that wouldn't bend. "You're going to get us both killed." "Probably." "And you're okay with that?" "Are you?" Caleb almost smiled. "Yeah, I am." They tied Iron to a tree deep in the forest where he'd be hidden. Then they moved toward the cabin, slow, low, using every bit of cover. Caleb went first, Elena right behind him, stepping where he stepped. The heat from the fire hit them 20 yards out. The smoke was thick, acrid, burning Caleb's eyes and throat. He pulled his shirt up over his nose and mouth and kept moving. 10 yards from the door, he spotted them. Two shapes on the far side of the clearing, one behind what was left of the woodpile. The other, Victor, unmistakable even through the smoke, standing beside the barn, arms crossed, watching the cabin burn like it was a show put on for his entertainment. Caleb held up a hand. Elena stopped. He pointed to the cabin door, or what was left of it, pointed to himself, then pointed to Elena and made a staying gesture. She shook her head. He glared at her. She glared back. No time to argue. The cabin's structural integrity was going by the second. If they were going to do this, it had to be now. Caleb moved. He broke from cover at a dead run, hit the porch, kicked through the burning door frame. Heat slammed into him like a physical thing. The interior was an inferno, flames everywhere, smoke so thick he couldn't see 3 feet. But he knew this cabin, knew every inch of it. He moved by memory, hands outstretched, feeling his way toward the fireplace. The heat was incredible. His skin felt like it was shrinking. His lungs screamed for clean air. There. Stone. Cool compared to everything else. He felt up the face of the fireplace, fingers searching for the pegs where his spare rifle hung. Empty. No. He searched again, higher, lower. Nothing. The rifle was gone. Either fallen into the fire or taken by Victor's men, or a board gave way beneath his feet. Caleb dropped, crashed through into the root cellar below. He landed hard, air exploding from his lungs. Above him, the cabin groaned, a sound like the mountain itself shifting. It was coming down. He scrambled up, looking for a way out. The entrance to the cellar was blocked by burning debris. The only other way was the ventilation shaft, a narrow opening barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Caleb grabbed the edges and pulled himself up. He was halfway out when he heard it. A scream. Elena. Caleb hauled himself the rest of the way out of the shaft and ran. The clearing had erupted into chaos. Elena was struggling against Victor's gunman, a big brute of a man who had her by the arm, trying to drag her toward the horses. She was fighting like a wildcat, kicking, biting, clawing at his face. Victor stood watching, amused. Caleb didn't think, just charged. He hit the gunman from behind, all his weight and momentum driving them both into the snow. The man was bigger, heavier, but Caleb had 15 years of mountain survival making him hard as iron. He got his arm around the man's throat and squeezed. The gunman thrashed, reaching back, trying to gouge Caleb's eyes. Caleb held on, squeezed harder. Elena scrambled away. The gunman's struggles got weaker, then stopped. Caleb shoved the body away and looked up. Victor had a gun pointed at Elena's head. "Enough," Victor said calmly. Caleb froze. "That's better." Victor's finger rested lightly on the trigger. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to step away from my man. You're going to walk into those trees and disappear. And Elena is going to come with me. Voluntarily." "Like hell," Elena started. Victor pressed the gun against her temple. "I said voluntarily. You can walk or I can drag your corpse. Either way, you're coming. If you kill her," Caleb said quietly, "you get nothing. No wedding, no legitimacy, just murder." "Who's going to prove it? You? The hermit nobody knows exists? The man who lives alone in the mountains with no witnesses?" Victor smiled. "I'll tell them she died in the storm. Tragic accident. I tried to save her, but the cold was too much. Everyone will believe me because I'm Victor Hale, and Victor Hale doesn't lie." "Yes, you do." Elena's voice was shaking, but clear. "You lied to my father, told him you'd take care of me, give me a good life. But you don't want a wife, you want property. What I want is irrelevant. What I have is a contract. Contracts can be broken. Not by you. You have nothing, no money, no power, no options. I own you, Elena. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." Elena looked at Caleb. Their eyes met across the snow and smoke. He saw the question there. "What do we do?" And beneath it, the trust. "Whatever you say, I'll do it." Caleb looked at Victor, at the gun, at the cold certainty in the man's eyes. Then he looked past him and smiled. "What's so amusing?" Victor demanded. "You made a mistake." "Did I?" "Yeah, you forgot about iron." Victor's expression flickered. "What?" The horse hit him from behind like a locomotive. 1,500 pounds of angry gelding, running full speed, driven by some instinct that told him Caleb needed help. Iron's shoulder caught Victor square in the back, launching him forward. The gun flew from his hand. Elena dove away. Victor hit the ground hard. Iron reared up, hooves coming down. "No!" Caleb shouted. The horse stopped, hooves inches from Victor's head. Stood there, breathing hard, eyes locked on the man who'd threatened his people. Caleb ran to Elena. "You okay?" She nodded, speechless. Victor groaned and tried to sit up. Blood ran from his nose, already freezing in the cold. He looked at Caleb with pure hatred. "You're dead, both of you. I will hunt you to the ends of the earth. I will use every resource I have. I will—" "Shut up." Caleb grabbed the fallen gun and pointed it at Victor's chest. For a long moment, nobody moved. The wind howled. The cabin collapsed behind them with a crash that sent embers spiraling into the sky. Iron stamped his feet, ready to charge again if needed, and Caleb stood there with a gun in his hand and a choice to make. He could pull the trigger, end it. Victor Hale dead in the snow, and nobody would ever know. The storm would cover the body. Spring would scatter the bones. Problem solved. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Caleb," Elena's voice, soft, scared. "Don't." "Why not? He tried to kill us." "I know, but if you kill him, you become him. You become someone who takes what he wants through violence. He deserves it." "Maybe, but you don't deserve to carry that for the rest of your life." Caleb looked at her, saw the plea in her eyes. The hope that he could be better than this moment demanded. And he realized something. She wasn't asking him to spare Victor for Victor's sake. She was asking him to spare Victor for his own. Slowly, Caleb lowered the gun. Victor laughed, bitter, broken. "Weak. I knew you were weak." "No," Elena said. "He's strong, stronger than you'll ever be, because he knows when to fight and when to stop." Caleb grabbed Victor by the collar and hauled him to his feet. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get on your horse. You're going to ride back to wherever you came from, and you're going to forget Elena exists. Or what? Or I change my mind about pulling this trigger. Caleb shoved him toward the horses. I've got nothing to lose, Victor. No home, no past, nothing tying me to civilized behavior. I can disappear into these mountains and never be found. Can you say the same? Can you hide from the man who knows this wilderness better than you know your own bedroom? Victor's face went pale. I'll find you, he said, but the conviction was gone from his voice. You can try. But while you're looking for me, I'll be hunting you. Every shadow, every sound, every moment you're alone, you'll wonder if I'm there. If today's the day, can you live like that? Silence. Then Victor spat blood into the snow and limped toward his horse. This isn't over, he said, climbing into the saddle. Yeah, Caleb replied. It is. Victor kicked his horse and rode away, back toward the pass, toward whatever life he'd left behind. They watched until he disappeared into the storm. Elena sagged against Caleb, all the strength draining out of her at once. He caught her, held her up, felt her shaking against him. Is he really gone? She whispered. For now. Will he come back? I don't know. She pulled away enough to look at him. What do we do now? You have no cabin, no supplies. Winter's just starting. Caleb looked at the smoking ruins of his home, at the mountain rising behind it, at the woman standing beside him who'd somehow become the only thing that mattered. We survive, he said. Like we've been doing. Together. Where? There's an old trapper's station about 10 miles north. Used to use it before I built the cabin. It's rough, but it'll keep us alive until spring. And then? Then we figure out what comes next. Elena nodded slowly. Then she did something unexpected. She kissed him. It was brief, awkward, cold-chapped lips against his, but it was real. And when she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said, for everything, for saving me, for fighting for me, for not killing him even though you wanted to. Caleb didn't know what to say, didn't trust himself to speak, so he just nodded. They gathered what they could from the ruins. A few tools, some supplies that hadn't burned. Not much, but enough. Iron stood waiting, patient despite everything. They climbed onto his back, Elena in front, Caleb behind, and turned north. Behind them, the cabin burned itself out. Ahead, the mountain waited. And somewhere between the ashes and the unknown, two broken people rode toward something that might, eventually, look like a future. The trapper's station wasn't a station. It was a hole in the ground with a roof. Caleb had called it rough. That was generous. The structure was half buried in the mountainside, 3 stone walls, 1 wooden wall that looked ready to collapse, and a roof made of logs and sod that leaked in a dozen places. Inside, the space was maybe 10 feet by 12. Dirt floor. No windows. A fire pit in the center with a hole in the roof for smoke that didn't work half the time. Elena stood in the doorway and stared. This is it? This is it. We're going to die here. Probably not. Caleb slid off iron and started unloading their meager supplies. I lived here for 2 winters before I built the cabin. It's not comfortable, but it works. Elena stepped inside. The ceiling was so low Caleb had to duck. She could stand upright, barely. The smell hit her immediately. Earth and old smoke and something else. Something wild. What is that smell? Bear. Used to den here before I claimed it. Comes back sometimes to check if I'm still around. A bear. Yeah, a bear lives here. Used to. Haven't seen him in years. Probably dead by now. Elena turned to look at him. That's not reassuring. Wasn't trying to be reassuring, was trying to be honest. She wrapped her arms around herself. The temperature inside was maybe 5 degrees warmer than outside. Maybe. Her breath still plumed in the air. The dirt floor was frozen solid. This was going to be a very long winter. Caleb got a fire going while Elena explored what little there was to explore. A pile of old furs in one corner, moth-eaten and stiff but better than nothing. Some rusted traps hanging from pegs in the wall, a water barrel empty and cracked, and carved into the stone above the fire pit, barely visible in the dim light, were tally marks. Hundreds of them. What are these? Elena ran her finger along the marks. Caleb didn't look up from the fire. Days. Days? First 2 years I was up here. Counted them. Thought I was keeping track of time. Really, I was just... He stopped. Doesn't matter. But Elena understood. He was counting the days since Sarah died, counting the distance between who he'd been and who he was becoming, counting himself into oblivion. "When did you stop?" she asked quietly. "When I realized it didn't matter. One day or 1,000, they all felt the same." The fire caught. Weak flames flickered to life, throwing dancing shadows across the stone walls. It wasn't much, but it was warmth. It was survival. Elena sat down across from him. "Thank you for bringing me here, for everything." "Don't thank me yet. We've got a long way to go before spring." "I know, but we're alive. That counts for something." Caleb looked at her through the smoke. Her face was smudged with soot. Her hair was wild, tangled. The expensive dress was long gone, replaced by his oversized clothes that made her look like a child playing dress-up. But her eyes were clear, determined. She'd changed since that first night he'd found her buried in the snow. Hardened, grown sharper edges. The soft richness that had clung to her like perfume was gone, burned away by cold and fear and the brutal reality of survival. She was becoming something else, something that belonged in these mountains. "Get some sleep," Caleb said. "Tomorrow, we start building." Building what? A life. A shelter. Whatever we can manage before the real cold hits. Elena laid down on the pile of furs. They smelled terrible, but they were warm. She curled into them, exhausted beyond words. Caleb sat by the fire and watched the flames. Outside, the wind picked up again. The storm that had paused was coming back, and this time it sounded angry. The next morning brought 4 feet of fresh snow and temperatures so cold the spit froze before it hit the ground. Caleb woke to find Elena already up, trying to coax the fire back to life. She was doing it wrong. Too much wood, not enough kindling, but she was trying. "Here," he took over, rebuilding the fire properly. "Small pieces first. Let them catch. Then add the bigger logs." "I knew that. Did you?" "No." He almost smiled. They ate a breakfast of dried venison and melted snow. It wasn't good. It wasn't supposed to be. It was fuel, energy to get through another day. After, Caleb took Elena outside and showed her what needed to be done. "First, we need more firewood. A lot more. Enough to last until March at minimum." "That's 4 months." "Yeah. We'll need to burn constant to keep from freezing. That means collecting, chopping, stacking every day." Elena looked at the forest around them. "Where do we even start?" "Dead trees. They're already dry. Cut better, burn hotter." He pointed to a fallen pine about 50 yards away. "That one. We'll start there." They worked all morning. Caleb cut while Elena hauled. It was brutal labor, dragging heavy logs through deep snow, muscles screaming, lungs burning from the cold. Elena fell twice, got back up both times, kept working. By noon, they'd moved half the tree. "How much more?" Elena panted, leaning against a log. "A lot." "That's not specific." "About 30 more trees this size. Maybe 40. She stared at him. "You're joking." "No. That's impossible." "No, it's necessary. We run out of wood, we die. Simple as that." Elena looked at the pile they'd already collected, then at the forest, then back at Caleb. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can. I'm not strong enough. I'm not built for this." Caleb walked over to her, put his hands on her shoulders, looked her straight in the eye. "You survived a stagecoach attack, survived being buried in snow, survived hypothermia, fought off a man twice your size, stood up to Victor Hale with a gun to your head. You're telling me you can't drag some logs?" "That was different." "How?" "I didn't have a choice. It was survive or die." "And this is different how?" Elena opened her mouth, closed it, realized he was right. This was the same choice, just slower, less dramatic, but every bit as deadly if she failed. "I hate you," she muttered. "Good. Use that. Get mad. Mad is strong." She grabbed the rope attached to the log and pulled. They worked until dark, moved the rest of the first tree, started on a second. By the time they stumbled back to the station, both were too exhausted to speak. Elena collapsed onto the furs. "I can't feel my hands." "That's bad. Let me see." He checked her fingers. Red, but not white. Cold, but not frozen. He rubbed them between his palms, forcing circulation back. Ow, that hurts. Good. Pain means you're alive. I preferred being numb. Numbness kills. Pain keeps you careful. He made dinner. More venison, some wild onions he'd found growing near the station, melted snow for drinking. It was better than breakfast. Barely. They ate in silence, too tired for conversation. After, Elena laid back and stared at the roof. Water dripped through one of the leaks, creating a small puddle near the fire pit. Tell me something, she said. Like what? Anything. Something good. Something that doesn't involve freezing or starving or dying. Caleb thought for a moment. When I was a kid, maybe 7 or 8, my dad took me hunting, first time. I was so excited I could barely sleep the night before. We went out before dawn, waited in a blind for hours. I was cold, bored, wanted to go home. Then this deer appeared. Perfect shot. My dad handed me the rifle, told me to take it. Did you? No, couldn't do it. Started crying instead. Thought my dad would be ashamed, but he just put his hand on my shoulder and said, "That's okay. Not everyone's meant to kill. Nothing wrong with that." But you learned anyway. Had to. Up here, killing's not about sport. It's about survival. But I never forgot what he said. That it's okay to feel something, even about taking a life to save your own. Elena was quiet for a while. My mother used to sing, every night before bed. Didn't matter how tired she was or how bad the day had been. She'd come into my room and sing these old folk songs her grandmother taught her. I can't remember most of the words now, but I remember the feeling, like being wrapped in something safe. What happened to her? Fever. Came on fast, took her in 3 days. One morning she was singing, the next she was gone. My father fell apart after that. Started gambling because it was easier than feeling. Started losing because he stopped caring. And eventually he lost everything, including himself. That why you ran? Not just from Victor, but from him too? Maybe. I don't know. I just knew I couldn't stay. Couldn't watch him throw away what was left. Couldn't become another thing he sacrificed to pay his debts. Caleb added another log to the fire. You did the right thing. Running. Did I? 3 people are dead because of me. Your cabin is burned. We're living in a hole eating scraps. How is any of that right? Those people didn't die because of you. They died because Victor's insane. My cabin burned because he's a monster. And we're alive because you had the guts to choose yourself over what everyone expected you to do. That's right. That's the only right thing in this whole mess. Elena turned her head to look at him. Do you really believe that? Yeah, I do. She smiled, small and sad and grateful all at once. You're a better man than you think you are, Caleb Rourke. And you're stronger than you know, Elena Whitlock. They fell asleep on opposite sides of the fire, wrapped in moth-eaten furs, listening to the wind trying to tear the roof off. The days blurred together after that. Wake up, feed the fire, eat, work, collect wood, haul water, hunt when they could, trap when they couldn't, check the perimeter for tracks, animal or human, repair the roof, patch the wall, survive. Some days were harder than others. There was the day Elena slipped on ice and fell 10 feet down a ravine, landing hard enough to knock the wind out of her. Caleb climbed down, certain she'd broken something, and found her laughing. Actually, laughing. When he asked why, she said, "Because I'm still alive. I fell off a cliff, and I'm still alive." That's funny. She wasn't wrong. There was the day Caleb's snares caught a mountain lion instead of a rabbit. The cat was young, stupid with hunger, and very angry about being trapped. It took 3 hours and a lot of careful maneuvering to get it free without losing a hand. Elena watched from a safe distance, ready with a makeshift spear, terrified the whole time. Afterward, Caleb was shaking so bad he couldn't light the fire. Elena did it instead. Didn't say anything about his hands, just built the fire and handed him coffee. There was the day they ran out of meat. All the snares were empty, no tracks to follow. The forest had gone quiet in that way it did when a big storm was coming, all the animals already hunkered down. They ate the last of the dried venison for breakfast. How long can we go without food? Elena asked. Depends. Week, maybe 2 if we're careful with our energy. And then? Then we start making bad decisions, taking risks we shouldn't, getting desperate. Sounds like we're already there. She wasn't wrong about that either. Caleb grabbed his rifle, the one he'd found in Victor's dead gunman's saddle. I'm going hunting, real hunting. Stay here. Keep the fire going. If I'm not back by dark, don't say it. Elena, you'll be back. You have to be back. Because I can't do this alone. He wanted to argue, wanted to prepare her for the possibility that sometimes people went into the mountains and didn't come back. But the look on her face stopped him. I'll be back, he said. He meant it. The hunt took him higher than he'd planned, farther than he should have gone. But he picked up tracks, elk, a small herd, and followed them into the high country. Dangerous in winter. The snow was deeper, the wind sharper, avalanche danger everywhere, but they needed food. He tracked the herd for 3 hours before he found them. 6 animals, including a young bull that had wandered away from the group. Vulnerable. Alone. Caleb lined up the shot. The rifle kicked. The elk dropped. Quick, clean. The way it should be. Caleb Field dressed it on the spot, working fast before the blood froze. Took the choice cuts, backstrap, tenderloins, haunches. Left the rest for the scavengers. Couldn't carry it all anyway. He was halfway back to the station when the storm hit. Not the slow build he'd expected. This came fast and violent, a whiteout in seconds, wind that hit like fists, snow so thick he couldn't see his own hands. Caleb stopped, tried to get his bearings. Nothing looked familiar. He'd been up here a dozen times, knew these mountains better than most men knew their own towns. But in a whiteout, everything disappeared. Landmarks vanished. Directions became meaningless. He could walk in circles until he collapsed, or he could find shelter and wait it out. There was a rock formation nearby, he thought, maybe 200 yards north. Or was it west? The wind kept changing direction, disorienting him. Caleb made a choice. Started walking. Every step was a gamble, every direction a guess. The meat on his back got heavier with each yard. His legs started to burn. His lungs screamed. He almost walked past it. The rocks materialized out of the white like ghosts. Caleb stumbled toward them, found an overhang, crawled underneath, out of the wind, out of the snow. He dropped the meat and collapsed. The storm raged outside his small shelter. Hours passed. The sky got darker. Night was coming, and with it, temperatures that would kill anything stupid enough to be caught outside. Caleb thought about Elena, about the promise he'd made, about whether she'd wait or assume he was dead and try to make it on her own. She'd wait. He knew she would. The question was whether he could make it back to her. The storm broke sometime after midnight. Caleb woke to silence, the kind that only comes after violence. He crawled out of his shelter and looked around. Stars. Millions of them. The sky cleared enough to see the mountains standing sharp against the night. And there, down the slope, a tiny orange glow. The fire. Elena had kept it burning. Caleb grabbed the meat and started walking. She heard him coming. Was standing in the doorway of the station when he emerged from the trees, rifle in one hand, ready to fight whatever was out there. When she saw it was him, she lowered the weapon. "You're late," she said. "Storm." "I noticed." He dropped the meat at her feet. "Elk. Should last us a month if we're careful." Elena looked at the meat, then at him. Then she threw her arms around him and held on like she'd never let go. "I thought—" Her voice broke. "I thought you weren't coming back." "Told you I would. People say things, doesn't make them true. I'm not people." She pulled back enough to look at him. Her eyes were wet. "No, you're not." They brought the meat inside, spent the next hour cutting it into strips for drying, rubbing it with the last of their salt. It was good work, purposeful, the kind that made survival feel less like a fight and more like a choice. "Tell me something else," Elena said while they worked. "Another story. A happy one." "Don't have many of those." "Make one up then." Caleb thought about it. "Okay, once upon a time there was a man who thought he wanted to be alone. Thought isolation was the same as peace. Spent 15 years proving himself right. Then one day, a woman crashed into his life. Literally crashed and ruined everything." This doesn't sound happy. "I'm getting there. The woman was annoying, asked too many questions, couldn't chop wood worth a damn, made terrible coffee, but she was also brave, stronger than she knew, and she made him remember what it felt like to care about something other than just surviving. Elena had stopped working, was watching him now. What happened to them? She asked quietly. Don't know yet. Story's still being written. How do you think it ends? Caleb met her eyes. However we write it. She kissed him again. Different from the first time. Longer, deeper. Like she was trying to pour everything she couldn't say into that single moment. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Elena, don't overthink this. Don't tell me all the reasons it's complicated or wrong or impossible. Just be here. With me. Right now. So he was. Winter deepened its grip on the mountain. January came and went, measured in storms and small victories. February arrived with temperatures so cold the trees split with sounds like gunshots. But inside the station, something was growing. Not just survival, not just tolerance, something warmer. Caleb taught Elena to shoot. Started with tin cans on stumps, moved to hunting small game. She was a terrible shot at first, flinched every time she pulled the trigger, couldn't hit anything smaller than the broadside of a barn. But she practiced. Every day. Until her hands stopped shaking and her aim steadied. The first rabbit she killed, she cried. It's okay, Caleb said. I took a life. To save ours. That's the deal. Nothing dies for sport up here. Everything serves a purpose. She wiped her eyes. Does it get easier? No, but you get better at carrying it. Elena learned to track, to read signs in the snow, the difference between deer and elk, predator and prey. Learned to move quietly, to stay downwind, to be patient. She learned to build snares, to skin animals, to cure hides. She learned to survive. And Caleb learned to open up. Not all at once, not easily, but slowly, over shared meals and long nights by the fire, he started talking. About Sarah, about the baby, about the guilt that had driven him into these mountains and the fear that had kept him here. I was afraid if I left I'd forget them, he admitted one night. Like if I rejoined the world, moved on, lived a normal life, it would mean they didn't matter, that I didn't love them enough. That's not how love works, Elena said. No? Love doesn't disappear just because someone dies. It changes shape, maybe. Becomes memory instead of presence. But it doesn't go away. They're still with you, in here. She pressed her hand against his chest. And living doesn't dishonor that. It honors it, because they'd want you to live. Caleb looked at her hand on his chest. How'd you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just trying to figure it out like everyone else. You're doing better than most. She smiled. We both are. March arrived with the first signs of thaw. Icicles dripped. Snow settled. The air lost some of its knife-edge sharpness. Spring was coming, and with it, decisions. One morning, Elena woke to find Caleb already up, standing in the doorway, looking out at the mountains. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing, just thinking. About? What happens next? When the pass is clear. When we can leave. Elena's stomach clenched. Do you want to leave? Do you want to stay? The question hung between them. Truth was, Elena didn't know. This winter had been brutal, terrifying. She'd come closer to death more times than she could count, but she'd also never felt more alive, more real, more herself. Back in Boston, she'd been a decoration, a bargaining chip, something pretty to look at and trade. Here, she was necessary, vital, a partner in survival. Going back meant returning to that world, to expectations and contracts and men like Victor who saw her as property. But staying meant what? A life in the mountains? Seasons of struggle? Aging fast and hard under conditions that broke most people? I don't know, she admitted. I don't know what I want. That's fair. What do you want? Caleb turned to look at her. I want you to be safe, to be happy, to have a choice about what comes next, real choice, not running, not hiding, but actually choosing. And if I choose to stay? With you? Something flickered across his face. Hope, maybe, or fear. Then we figure out how to make that work. Even though it's hard? Especially because it's hard. Easy doesn't mean anything. Hard is where you find out what you're made of. Elena stood and crossed to him, took his hand. I'm made of whatever you're made of, she said. We survived this together. Maybe we can survive the rest too. Caleb squeezed her hand. Maybe we can. Outside, a bird called, the first one they'd heard in months. Spring was coming, and with it, the future, whatever that meant. But spring didn't come with flowers and gentle warmth. It came with mud and melting ice and the sound of the mountain waking up angry. The first real thaw hit in mid-March. Overnight, the temperature climbed 20 degrees. Snow that had been solid for months turned to slush. The creek that ran past the station, frozen silent all winter, roared back to life with a violence that shook the ground. Caleb woke to the sound of water where water shouldn't be. He bolted upright. The dirt floor of the station was wet. Not damp, wet. Pooling in the low spots, seeping through cracks in the stone walls. Elena, get up. She was already moving, grabbing their supplies, shoving them toward the high ground near the back wall. Outside, the roar got louder. Caleb pushed open the door. The creek had jumped its banks. Water rushed past the station, brown and churning, carrying debris. Branches, rocks, chunks of ice the size of a man's chest. It hadn't reached them yet, but it was close. 20 feet, maybe less. We need to move, now! They worked fast, grabbing what they could carry. The dried meat, their weapons, the furs, tools. Elena stuffed her arms full while Caleb ran to get iron from where they'd built him a rough shelter against the hillside. The horse was already spooked, eyes rolling, fighting the rope. Easy, easy. Caleb got him loose and led him back toward the station. The water was closer now, 15 feet. The ground beneath Caleb's feet had turned to soup, sucking at his boots with each step. Elena appeared in the doorway, loaded down with their supplies. Where do we go? Higher ground, the ridge. Move. They scrambled up the hillside, slipping in mud, Elena falling twice before Caleb grabbed her arm and hauled her up. Iron followed, sure-footed despite the chaos, trusting Caleb to lead him somewhere safe. They made it to the ridge just as the water reached the station. It didn't flood slowly. It consumed. One moment the entrance was clear, the next it was underwater. The wooden wall they'd reinforced all winter buckled, collapsed. The roof sagged, then caved in completely, and the whole structure just disappeared, swallowed by brown water and debris like it had never existed. Elena watched it go, breathing hard. 4 months. We survived 4 months there, and it's just gone. Could have been worse, could have been asleep when it hit. How is that better? At least then we wouldn't have to figure out what to do next. Caleb looked around. The ridge they stood on was maybe 50 yards long, rocky and exposed. No shelter, no protection from the wind that was already picking up. And below them, where the station had been, the water kept rising. We can't stay here, he said. Where else is there? Good question. The cabin was ash. The station was underwater. Every other shelter Caleb knew about in these mountains was either too far or already claimed by animals. Except one. There's a cave, he said slowly, about 3 miles east, near the old mining claim. I used it once when I got caught in a storm. It's dry, defensible, big enough for all of us. 3 miles in this? Elena gestured at the mud, the water, the chaos. You have a better idea? She didn't. They started walking. 3 miles turned into 5 because nothing was where it should be. The landscape had transformed overnight. Familiar landmarks were underwater. Trails had become streams. Rocks they'd used as markers were buried in mud. Caleb navigated by memory and instinct, trying to stay on high ground, avoiding areas that looked unstable. Twice they had to backtrack when they hit washouts too deep to cross. Once they nearly lost iron when the ground gave way beneath him, but the horse scrambled back up, snorting his displeasure. By the time they found the cave, all three were exhausted and filthy. But it was there, just like Caleb remembered, a dark opening in the hillside, partially hidden by an overhang. Water ran past the entrance but didn't go in. The cave floor was elevated, protected. They ducked inside. The space was bigger than the station had been, maybe 20 feet deep, 15 wide. The ceiling high enough to stand upright. The back wall was solid rock. No cracks, no leaks, and best of all, it was dry. Elena dropped their supplies and sat down hard. I can't do this anymore. Do what? This. Running, starting over, losing everything every time we get settled. I'm tired, Caleb. I'm so tired. He sat beside her. I know. Do you? Because you seem fine, like this is just normal for you. Losing your home, getting chased, nearly dying. It's all just another day. It's not normal. It's never normal. I've had practice pretending it is. Elena turned to look at him. Her face was smudged with mud, her hair wild, her eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion. How do you do it? How do you keep going when everything keeps falling apart? Because the alternative is giving up. And I tried that once. Spent 15 years giving up. It didn't make anything better. Just made me numb. Maybe numb is better than this. No, trust me, it's not. She leaned against him, head on his shoulder. I don't know how much more I have in me. You have more than you think. You always do. What if I don't? What if this is it? What if I can't? You can. Because you're not alone. We do this together, like we've been doing, one day at a time, one crisis at a time. And eventually we get through to the other side. And if there is no other side? Caleb put his arm around her. Then at least we're together when we find that out. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the water rush past the cave entrance. Outside, the world was remaking itself. Inside, two people tried to hold on to what little they had left. Eventually, Elena pulled away. We should build a fire, get dry before we freeze. Yeah, good idea. They worked together, gathering wood from the back of the cave where previous occupants had left it. The fire took longer to catch than usual. Everything was damp, but eventually flames appeared. Weak at first, then stronger. Light filled the cave, and with it, something else. Something Caleb couldn't quite name but felt in his chest. A settling, like pieces falling into place. This cave wasn't the station, wasn't the cabin, but it was theirs now. Another temporary home in a series of temporary homes. Another place to make work because they had to. Elena moved closer to the fire, holding her hands out to the warmth. What now? We dry out, rest. Tomorrow we scout the area, see what's still viable. And after that? After that, we figure out the next step. Same as always. She nodded. Then, without warning, she started laughing. Caleb frowned. What's funny? This. All of it. A year ago, I was in Boston wearing silk dresses and worrying about which fork to use at dinner. Now I'm sitting in a cave, covered in mud, eating dried elk, and honestly, she looked at him. I've never been happier. You're insane. Probably, but it's true. Back there, I was just existing, playing a role, being what everyone expected. Here, I'm real. Messy and scared and constantly exhausted, but real. And I'd rather be this than go back to being that. Caleb studied her face. She meant it, every word. You know, if we stay up here, it doesn't get easier. Spring means mud, summer means forest fires, fall means getting ready for the next winter. It's a cycle. It never stops. I know. And there's no guarantee, no safety net. We could starve, get sick, die from 100 different things. I know that too. Then why stay? Elena met his eyes. Because you're here. Because when I'm with you, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm only afraid of not living. Does that make sense? It did. More than Caleb wanted to admit. Yeah, he said quietly. It makes sense. She scooted closer, close enough that their shoulders touched. Tell me we're going to make it. Even if it's a lie. Just tell me. We're going to make it. Promise? Promise. She kissed him. Soft at first, then deeper. Like she was trying to convince herself he was real, that this was real. That they hadn't just imagined each other into existence out of desperation and need. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Elena, don't overthink this, please. Just be here. So he was. There in the firelight. There in the warmth. There with her. And for the first time since Sarah died, Caleb let himself feel something other than grief. He let himself feel hope. The next week was spent rebuilding. Again. They reinforced the cave entrance with rocks and logs to keep animals out, built a proper fire pit with stones from the creek, strung a rope across the back for drying clothes and meat, made beds from pine boughs and the furs they'd salvaged. It wasn't comfortable, but it was functional. Elena threw herself into the work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Up before dawn, working until after dark. Building, organizing, improving. Like if she stopped moving, she'd have to think about everything they'd lost. Caleb recognized the pattern. He'd done the same thing after Sarah died, worked himself to exhaustion every day so he'd be too tired to feel anything. "You need to rest," he told her one evening. "I'm fine." "You're not. You're running yourself into the ground." "I said I'm fine." "Elena, don't." She spun to face him, eyes blazing. "Don't tell me what I need. Don't tell me to slow down or take care of myself or any of that. I need to work. I need to stay busy. Because if I stop, if I let myself think about everything, I'll fall apart. And I can't fall apart. Not now. Not when we're so close to what? I don't know. Something. Anything. A life that makes sense, a place we can stay without losing it. I don't know what I'm looking for, but I know I haven't found it yet." Caleb crossed to her, put his hands on her shoulders. "You're looking for certainty, stability, some guarantee that the ground won't keep shifting under your feet." "Yes, exactly. You're not going to find it, not up here, not anywhere. Life doesn't come with guarantees." "Then what's the point?" "The point is we keep trying anyway. We build knowing it might fall apart. We care knowing we might lose everything. We hope knowing we might be disappointed, because the alternative is giving up. And we don't give up. You taught me that." Elena's eyes filled. "I didn't teach you anything. You were already strong. I was already dead, just still breathing. You brought me back, forced me to care again, to want something other than just surviving another day. So yeah, you taught me. You taught me it's okay to hope." A tear slid down her cheek. "What if I can't do this? What if I'm not as strong as you think? Then I'll be strong enough for both of us. Until you find yours again, same way you did for me all winter." She collapsed against him, sobbing. Not quiet tears. Big racking sobs that shook her whole body. Months of fear and exhaustion and loss pouring out all at once. Caleb held her, didn't try to stop her or tell her it would be okay, just held her while she broke and hoped she'd come back together stronger. Eventually, the sobs slowed. Stopped. Elena pulled back, wiping her face. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I'm a mess. So am I. We're both a mess. That's okay." She almost smiled. "What would we do without each other? Probably die alone in the woods. That's dark, but accurate." This time she did smile. Small, but real. "Yeah, accurate." They sat by the fire that night, not talking, just being, together. And somehow that was enough. April brought more chaos. The flooding continued for 2 weeks before finally receding. By the time the water dropped, the landscape had been rewritten. Trees that had stood for decades were gone, ripped out by the roots. The creek had carved a new channel 1/2 mile from its original path. And everywhere, mud. Thick, slick, impossible mud that made travel treacherous. But with the chaos came opportunity. Fish. Thousands of them, stranded in pools and eddies as the water receded. Caleb and Elena spent 3 days catching as many as they could, smoking them over the fire until they had enough protein to last months. New plants appeared in areas that had been underwater, greens and roots and mushrooms. Elena learned to identify the edible ones, building their food stores beyond just meat. And animals. Drawn by the same resources, deer and elk returned to the valley below the cave. Caleb's hunting improved with the easier access. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were living, building something that looked almost like a future. Then one morning in late April, Elena woke up sick. It started with nausea. She made it outside the cave before vomiting, but barely. Caleb found her leaning against a tree, pale and shaking. "What's wrong?" "I don't know. Stomach. Maybe something I ate?" "We ate the same things." "Then maybe I'm just..." She stopped, went even paler. "Oh no." "What?" Elena looked at him, eyes wide with something that might have been fear or wonder or both. "When was my last monthly bleeding?" Caleb's brain stuttered. What? My cycle. When was..." She counted on her fingers. Counted again. "I haven't bled since January, maybe December. I thought it was the stress. The cold. Bodies shut down when they're under that much strain." "They do?" "Caleb." Her voice shook. "I think I might be pregnant." The world tilted. Pregnant. The word hit Caleb like a physical blow. Images flashed through his mind: Sarah, pale and bleeding, the midwife's helpless hands, the tiny body that never drew breath, the frozen ground, the grief that had swallowed him whole. "No," he said. "No, you can't be. I might be. The nausea, the missed cycles, No." He backed away. "This isn't... We can't... Caleb, you could die!" The words exploded out of him. "Do you understand that? We're 3 miles from the nearest town, 50 miles from a doctor. If something goes wrong, if you bleed or the baby's turned wrong, or I know the risks." "No, you don't. You weren't there. You didn't watch someone you loved die while you stood there useless. You didn't bury..." His voice broke. "You didn't bury them both." Elena stepped toward him. "Caleb, look at me." He couldn't meet her eyes, couldn't face what this meant. "Look at me." Finally he did. She was crying, but her voice was steady. "I'm scared too, terrified, but running away won't change what's happening, and pushing me away won't protect either of us from the pain if something goes wrong. All it does is make sure we face it alone instead of together. I can't lose you. You won't. You don't know that." "No. But I know I have a better chance with you here than with you running. So please, please don't run." Caleb wanted to. Every instinct screamed at him to grab his rifle and disappear into the mountains, to put distance between himself and the possibility of reliving his worst nightmare. But Elena was right. Running wouldn't change anything, wouldn't protect her, wouldn't save him from the pain if the worst happened. All it would do is make him alone, again. And he'd promised himself, promised her, that he wouldn't be that person anymore. Slowly, Caleb nodded. Okay, we do this together." "Together," Elena repeated. He pulled her close, felt her trembling against him. "We're going to need help. Someone who knows about birthing, medicine, someone who can... The town. We have to go to the town. That's a 3-day walk, maybe more if the trails are still washed out. Then we start tomorrow. Elena, you can barely keep food down. You're not strong enough to... I'm strong enough to do what needs to be done. Same as always." She was right about that, too. They spent the rest of the day preparing, packed light, just the essentials. Food, water, weapons. Left Iron with most of their supplies in the cave. He'd be safe there, safer than on the trail where one wrong step could mean disaster. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay awake, listening to Elena's breathing, thinking about what came next, about all the ways this could go wrong, and about the one way it could go right. A child. His child. Growing inside the woman he'd come to love. Part of him was terrified. But another part, a part he'd thought died with Sarah, felt something else. Joy. Small. Fragile. But there. "You still awake?" Elena's voice in the darkness. "Yeah. Me too." "Scared?" "Terrified. You?" "Same." She rolled over to face him. "Tell me something true, something you've never said out loud." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "I love you. I think I have since that first night when you woke up and accused me of killing everyone. You were fierce and broken and so damn stubborn. And I thought if I could just keep my distance, I'd be safe. Wouldn't get attached. But you didn't let me. You pushed and challenged and made me feel things I'd spent 15 years trying not to feel. And now I can't imagine being without you. So yeah, I love you. And it scares the hell out of me." Elena was crying again, but smiling too. "I love you too. Have for a while now. Didn't know how to say it. Didn't know if you'd want to hear it. I want to hear it, every day for the rest of our lives, however long that is. Even if it's short? Especially if it's short, I'd rather have 1 real year with you than 50 fake ones with anyone else." She kissed him. "We're going to make it, all of us. I don't know how, but we will. You sound pretty sure about that. I have to be, because the alternative is unacceptable." Caleb held her close. "Then we make it happen, whatever it takes." They left at first light. The trail down the mountain was worse than Caleb remembered, washed out in places, blocked by fallen trees in others. They had to detour constantly, adding miles to an already long journey. Elena struggled. The nausea was worse in the mornings, leaving her weak and shaky. But she pushed through, determined not to slow them down. By the second day, Caleb was carrying most of their supplies to lighten her load. By the third, he was half carrying her, one arm around her waist, supporting her weight. "I can walk," she protested. "I know, but you don't have to. We'll never make it at this pace. We'll make it, just slower." They stopped early that night, making camp near a stream. Elena collapsed immediately, too exhausted to eat. Caleb built a fire and heated water for tea, made her drink it even though she didn't want to. "You need to keep your strength up." "I'm trying." "I know, you're doing great. I'm slowing us down." "You're growing a human." "That's a pretty good excuse for being slow." She managed a weak smile. "You're too good to me." "Nah, just returning the favor. You took care of me all winter. My turn now." Elena's eyes drifted closed. Within minutes, she was asleep. Caleb sat watch, feeding the fire, listening to the night sounds, wondering what they'd find when they reached the town, wondering if help would be enough, wondering if he was strong enough to survive losing everything again. He didn't have answers, just hope. And right now, that had to be enough. The town of Clancy Peak wasn't much. 24 buildings scattered along a mud-caked main street, most of them leaning like drunk men. A general store, a saloon that doubled as a boarding house, a blacksmith, and at the far end, a small wooden structure with a hand-painted sign that read, "Dr. Margaret Chen, Physician." Caleb had never been so grateful to see civilization in his life. They stumbled into town just after noon on the fourth day. Elena was barely conscious, leaning heavily against him, her skin hot to the touch. The nausea had gotten worse overnight, and this morning she'd started running a fever. People stopped to stare as they passed. A mountain man and a sick woman made for good gossip in a town this small. Caleb ignored them all, focused only on getting Elena to the doctor's office. He kicked the door open without knocking. Inside, a woman looked up from where she was grinding something with a mortar and pestle. She was maybe 50, Chinese, with sharp eyes that took in the situation immediately. "Pregnant?" she asked. "Maybe. We don't know for sure." "Put her on the table." Caleb laid Elena down as gently as he could. The doctor was already moving, hands checking pulse, eyes, temperature. She worked with the kind of efficiency that came from years of practice. "How long has she been sick?" 3 days, started with nausea. Fever came last night." "Any bleeding?" "No." "Pain in her abdomen?" "She hasn't said." Dr. Chen looked at him. "You need to leave. I'll examine her properly. You can wait outside." "I'm not leaving her." "Yes, you are. Or I won't help either of you." Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to plant himself by Elena's side and refused to budge. But the look on the doctor's face told him there was no negotiating. He stepped outside. The street was still watching. Caleb found a spot against the wall and slid down, sitting in the mud, too exhausted to care. His hands were shaking. When had they started shaking? Time passed. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. The sun moved across the sky. The townspeople eventually lost interest and went back to their business. Finally, the door opened. Dr. Chen stepped out, wiping her hands on a cloth. Her expression was unreadable. "She's pregnant. About 4 months along, I'd estimate." 4 months. That meant it happened back in January, in the station, during one of those long nights when they'd held each other against the cold. "The fever?" Caleb asked. "Not pregnancy-related. She's malnourished and exhausted. Her body's been running on fumes for so long it's starting to shut down. The pregnancy is making it worse, but it's not the cause." "Will she—" He couldn't finish the question. "She needs rest. Real rest. Not just a few hours between surviving. She needs proper food, clean water, warmth. If she gets those things, she'll recover. The baby too. And if she doesn't?" Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Then you'll lose them both. I'm sorry, but that's the truth." Caleb felt the world tilt. "How long? For the rest?" "At least a month. Maybe 2. Until she's strong enough to handle the physical demands of late pregnancy." "We don't have a month. We don't have anywhere to stay." "Then you'll need to find somewhere, because if you take her back up that mountain now, she won't survive it." The doctor went back inside, leaving Caleb alone with the weight of impossible decisions. He couldn't stay in town. He had no money, no connections. Nobody here knew him, and the few who did probably remembered him as the crazy hermit who disappeared into the mountains 15 years ago. But he couldn't leave either, not if it meant killing Elena and their child. He was still sitting there, trying to figure out what the hell to do, when a shadow fell across him. Caleb looked up. An old man stood there, maybe 70, weathered face creased with lines that could have been from smiling or squinting into too many suns. Hard to tell which. "You're Rourke," the man said. Not a question. "Yeah. Thought you were dead." "Disappointed?" The old man smiled. "Nah, just surprised. You disappeared so completely, most folks figured you froze to death that first winter." "Almost did. But you didn't, and now you're here, with a pregnant woman who needs help." The old man squatted down, joints popping. "I'm Thomas Greer. Used to run the lumber mill before my son took over. Got a cabin on the edge of town. Small, but it's got a bed and a stove. You and your woman can stay there. No charge." Caleb frowned. "Why would you help us?" "Because I remember you. Remember your wife, too. Sarah, right? Red hair, nice woman. She helped my daughter when she got sick one winter. Sat up with her 3 nights straight. Wouldn't leave until the fever broke." Thomas's eyes were kind. "Figure I owe her memory at least this much." Something cracked in Caleb's chest. "I can't pay you." "Don't want payment, just want to help. That okay with you?" Caleb nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Thomas stood. "Come on, let's get your woman settled." The cabin was small, like Thomas had said. 1 room, but it was clean and dry and warm. There was a real bed with a real mattress, a working stove, shelves stocked with basic supplies. Caleb carried Elena inside and laid her on the bed. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. "Doctor says she needs rest and food," Caleb said. "Then that's what she'll get. My daughter Mary will bring meals. You just focus on taking care of her." "Why are you doing this? Really?" Thomas looked at him for a long moment. "Because 15 years ago, you lost everything. And instead of asking for help, you disappeared. Chose to suffer alone rather than burden anyone else. That's noble, I guess. But it's also stupid. We're all carrying something, Rourke. Nobody gets through this life without scars. The difference between surviving and thriving is whether you let people help carry the weight." He left before Caleb could respond. Caleb sat beside the bed and took Elena's hand. It was warm now, no longer burning with fever. Her breathing was steady, peaceful. For the first time in days, the knot in his chest loosened slightly. Elena woke 2 hours later. She looked around the unfamiliar room, confused, until her eyes found Caleb. "Where are we?" "Clancy Peak. The doctor examined you. You're okay. The baby's okay. But you need rest." "How long?" "Month or 2. We can't afford that. We can't afford not to. Elena, you were dying. Another day on the trail and—" He stopped. "We're staying, however long it takes." She wanted to argue. He could see it in her eyes, but the exhaustion won out. She nodded and closed her eyes again. The weeks that followed were strange. Caleb wasn't used to accepting help, wasn't used to people showing up with food and blankets and kindness. But Thomas's daughter Mary came every day with meals. The doctor stopped by to check on Elena. Even strangers would nod to Caleb on the street, offering quiet words of encouragement. It was uncomfortable, foreign. Everything Caleb had run from 15 years ago. But Elena was getting stronger. The color returned to her face. The fever stayed gone. Her appetite came back. And slowly, the shape of her belly became visible. A child. Growing. Living. Defying every fear Caleb carried. One evening in early June, they sat outside the cabin watching the sunset. Elena's hand rested on her stomach, feeling the small movements inside. "Can you feel it?" she asked. Caleb placed his hand beside hers. There. A flutter. Like a butterfly trapped beneath the skin. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I feel it. Are you still scared?" "Terrified." "Me too, but also excited. Is that strange?" "No, makes sense. Both can be true." Elena leaned against him. "What happens after, when the baby comes?" "We figure it out, same as everything else." "Do we go back to the mountains, stay here? I don't know what I want anymore." Caleb had been thinking about that question for weeks. The mountains had been his refuge for so long, his escape, his prison. Now, now they felt less like home and more like a place he'd hidden. I don't know either, he admitted. Part of me wants to go back. It's what I know. Where I feel, not safe, but in control. But another part thinks maybe it's time to stop running. You're not running, you're surviving. Is there a difference? I think so. Running is about what you're leaving behind. Surviving is about what you're moving toward. Caleb looked at her. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just tired of being afraid, tired of letting fear make my decisions. I want to choose, really choose. Not because I'm desperate or trapped or out of options, but because I actually want something. What do you want? Elena was quiet for a moment. I want a life where I don't have to fight for every breath, where our child can grow up safe, where you can carve your wolves and I can plant a garden and we can just be, without constantly looking over our shoulders. That's a good want. Yeah, it is. She turned to look at him. Do you think it's possible, after everything? Do you think we can actually have that? Caleb thought about Sarah, about the life they'd built that got ripped away, about 15 years of isolation and grief, about Elena crashing into his world and forcing him to feel again, about the small life growing between them. Yeah, he said finally, I think we can. 2 months later, on an August night when the air was thick and still, Elena went into labor. It started slow. Small contractions that made her wince but were manageable. Dr. Chen had been staying at the cabin for the past week, preparing. She'd seen enough births to know this one was coming soon. How bad? The doctor asked. Not bad yet, but getting stronger. Good. That's normal. Caleb paced. He couldn't help it. Every instinct screamed at him to do something, fix something, control something. But there was nothing to control. Just Elena and the baby and the terrible uncertainty of what came next. Hours passed. The contractions got worse. Elena gritted her teeth through them, refusing to scream. But Caleb saw the pain in her eyes, saw her knuckles go white gripping the bed frame. You're doing great, Dr. Chen said. Won't be long now. How long? Elena gasped. Could be minutes, could be hours. Every baby's different. It was hours. Long, brutal hours where Caleb felt completely useless. He held Elena's hand, wiped sweat from her face, told her she was strong, she could do this. He was right here, but inside he was drowning in memories. Sarah's screams, the midwife's panicked face, the blood. So much blood. Caleb. Elena's voice cut through the spiral. Look at me. He did. I'm not her. This isn't then. I'm right here, right now, and I need you here too, not in the past. Here. Can you do that? Could he? Every part of him wanted to run, to escape before the worst could happen, but Elena's eyes held him, anchored him. Yeah, he managed. I can do that. Good, because this baby's coming whether we're ready or not. She was right. 20 minutes later, Dr. Chen said, I see the head, next contraction, push. Elena pushed, and then a cry, not Elena's. Smaller, higher, the sound of new life announcing itself to the world. It's a girl, Dr. Chen said, holding up a tiny, squirming thing covered in blood and vernix. She's perfect. The doctor cleaned the baby quickly, efficiently, then placed her on Elena's chest. Elena was crying, laughing, holding this impossibly small person like she was the most precious thing in the world. Which she was. Caleb stood frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. A baby. His baby. Alive. Healthy. Real. Come here, Elena said. Come meet your daughter. He moved on autopilot, sat on the edge of the bed, looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. She had dark hair, Elena's hair. But when she opened her eyes, just for a second, they were light. Maybe blue. Maybe gray. Hard to tell yet. You want to hold her? Elena asked. I don't know how. Neither do I. We'll figure it out. Elena shifted the baby into his arms. She was so light, so fragile. Caleb was terrified he'd break her just by holding wrong. But he didn't. She settled against his chest, making small noises. Content, safe, and something inside Caleb that had been broken for 15 years started to heal. Not all at once, not completely, but enough. Enough to let himself hope, to believe maybe this time things could be different. Maybe this time he could hold on to what mattered instead of losing it to cold and circumstance and cruel chance. "What should we name her?" Elena asked. Caleb looked at his daughter, at Elena, at the life they'd somehow built from nothing. "Sarah," he said quietly, "after my wife, if that's okay." Elena's eyes filled. "It's perfect." Dr. Chen finished cleaning up and gave them space, told them to rest, said she'd check back in the morning. The three of them, Caleb, Elena, and baby Sarah, stayed curled together in that small cabin. New family, new beginning. "We did it," Elena whispered. "We actually did it." "Yeah, we did." "What now?" Caleb looked out the window. The mountains were visible in the distance, dark shapes against the night sky. Beautiful, deadly. Home. But maybe home could be more than one place. "Now we figure out how to live," he said. "Not just survive, actually live. How do we do that?" "I don't know. But we'll figure it out, together, like everything else." Baby Sarah made a small sound. Not quite a cry, but close. Caleb adjusted his hold and she settled again. Elena smiled. "You're already good at this." "Don't know about that." "I do." They fell asleep like that, exhausted, scared, but together. And in the morning, they started figuring out what came next. The next year was hard in different ways than the mountain had been hard. Caleb took work where he could find it, helped at the lumber mill, did repairs around town, carved small figures to sell to travelers passing through. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them fed. Elena recovered slowly. The birth had taken a lot out of her, and the doctor warned she might not be able to have more children. Elena said she was fine with that. One was enough. One was everything. Sarah grew fast. From tiny newborn to squirming infant to a baby who smiled and laughed and grabbed at everything. She was loud, messy, perfect. And slowly, Caleb learned to let himself be happy. It wasn't easy. There were days when the grief came back hard. When he'd look at Sarah and see the child he'd lost. When he'd wake up in a panic, certain Elena had stopped breathing. But those days got fewer, further apart. And Elena was there, always there, reminding him to breathe, to stay present, to let himself feel joy instead of waiting for it to be ripped away. One evening in late fall, they sat outside watching Sarah crawl through the grass. She was 7 months old now, fast, fearless, getting into everything. "I've been thinking," Elena said. "Yeah?" "About the mountains, about whether we should go back." Caleb had been thinking about it too. The cave was still there, their supplies, iron. Part of him missed the simplicity, the isolation. But another part, the bigger part, liked this, liked having neighbors, liked Sarah growing up around other people, liked not having to fight for survival every single day. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think we should stay, at least for now. Let Sarah get bigger, stronger, and then maybe then we can decide. Show her both worlds, let her choose what she wants. She's going to want the town. Everyone does. Maybe. Or maybe she'll be like her father. Maybe she'll want the wild. Or maybe she'll be like her mother, stubborn and impossible to predict." Elena laughed. "That's probably most likely." Sarah discovered a bug, picked it up, put it in her mouth. Both parents lunged forward. "No, Sarah, no!" They wrestled the bug away from her. She cried. Caleb handed her a stick instead. She was immediately fascinated. "We're going to have our hands full," Elena said. "Yeah, we are. Worth it, though. Definitely worth it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter explore the world with the kind of fearless curiosity only children possess. And Caleb realized something. He wasn't afraid anymore, not of loss, not of pain, not of the future. Because whatever came next, good or bad, he wouldn't face it alone. He had Elena, had Sarah, had a life that mattered. The mountains would always be there, wild and beautiful and deadly, ready to take him back if he chose. But right now, in this moment, he chose this. Chose family. Chose love. Chose to live instead of just survive. That night, after Sarah was asleep, Caleb sat at the table and picked up his carving knife. Started working on a fresh piece of pine. Elena watched from the bed. "What are you making?" "A wolf," Another one? Yeah, but this one's different. How? Caleb studied the wood, saw the shape taking form. This one's not alone. He carved for hours, let the knife find the story in the wood. And when he was done, it wasn't just a wolf, it was a pack. 3 wolves, one large, one smaller, one tiny, running together through carved trees and mountains. Family. Elena came to look at it in the morning light. It's beautiful. It's us. I know. She kissed his cheek. Keep it. Don't sell this one. I won't. He placed it on the shelf above their bed. A reminder. A promise. A declaration that some things were worth keeping. Years passed. Sarah grew into a wild child who climbed trees and caught fish and could track a deer better than most grown men by the time she was 8. She had Elena's determination and Caleb's love of the wild. And somehow, she was better than both of them combined. Caleb and Elena grew older too. Grayer. Harder in some ways, softer in others. They built a real house on the edge of town. Not huge, but theirs. With a workshop for Caleb's carvings and a garden for Elena's herbs. They never forgot the mountains. Some summers they'd go back, spend weeks at the cave, show Sarah where they'd survived that first brutal winter, teach her everything they'd learned. But they always came back to the town, to the community they'd slowly become part of, to the life they'd built from ashes and desperation and stubborn refusal to give up. Victor never came back. Caleb heard through town gossip that the railroad baron had lost his fortune in some bad investment. Last anyone knew, he was living in San Francisco, broke and bitter. Elena said she hoped he found peace. Caleb said he didn't care either way. They both meant it. Thomas Greer died when Sarah was 10. They all went to the funeral. Caleb gave the eulogy, talked about kindness and second chances and how one act of generosity could change everything. Half the town cried, the other half nodded along. Dr. Chen retired but stayed in town, taught Elena everything she knew about medicine and healing. Elena became the unofficial nurse, helping with births and injuries and illnesses. She was good at it, had a talent for making people feel safe when they were scared. And Caleb kept carving. His wolves became famous in their small way. Travelers would stop specifically to buy them. He never made much money, but that wasn't the point. The point was creation, making something beautiful from raw materials, finding the life in dead wood. He carved wolves for everyone who asked, but he always kept one piece for himself. The pack. The 3 wolves running together, a reminder of where they'd come from, what they'd survived, what they'd built. One evening, when Sarah was 15 and full of questions about everything, she asked the question Caleb had been waiting for. Do you regret it? Going to the mountains? Losing all those years? Caleb thought about it, really thought. No, he said, finally. I needed those years. Needed to break before I could heal. If I'd stayed in the valley after your mother, after Sarah, I would have destroyed myself. The mountains gave me space to grieve, to survive, to eventually find my way back to living. But you were alone. I was. And I thought that's what I wanted, what I needed. But I was wrong. Being alone didn't protect me from pain. It just made sure I faced it without help, without hope. Then why did Mom save you? If you were so determined to be alone? Caleb smiled. She didn't save me. Not really. She just refused to let me stay broken, forced me to remember what it felt like to care about someone other than myself. And that changed everything. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I want to see it, the cave, where you lived. We've been there. No, I mean, really see it. Spend a winter there. See if I'm strong enough. Elena, listening from the doorway, shook her head. Absolutely not. Mom, yeah? You're 15. You're not spending a winter in the mountains alone. Then come with me, both of you, like old times. Caleb and Elena exchanged looks. We're too old for that, Elena said. You're not that old. We're old enough to know better. But Sarah kept pushing, and eventually they agreed. One winter, together. A family trip back to where it all started. They went that November. It was brutal. Harder than Caleb remembered. His joints ached. His lungs couldn't handle the cold like they used to. Elena struggled with the altitude, but Sarah thrived. She was made for this. The wild, the challenge, the constant edge of danger. She hunted, trapped, kept them fed when Caleb couldn't. And watching her, watching this fierce, capable young woman they'd created, Caleb felt something settle in his chest. Pride. Pure and uncomplicated. They'd done it. Against all odds, against every fear, they'd raised a child who was strong and kind and unafraid, who knew how to survive but also how to live, who understood that being alone wasn't the same as being strong. They stayed 3 months, left in February when the storms got too dangerous even for Sarah's enthusiasm. Back in town, Sarah announced she wanted to be a guide, lead hunting parties and explorers into the mountains, use what she knew to help people. Caleb said he thought that was a fine idea. Elena said she'd worry every day but wouldn't try to stop her. Sarah hugged them both. Thank you for everything, for surviving, for finding each other, for giving me this life. You don't have to thank us, Elena said. I know, but I want to. That night, Caleb carved one more wolf, a fourth one, smaller than the original 3, running ahead of the pack, leading the way. He added it to the carving, now 4 wolves instead of 3. She's going to leave, Elena said, watching him work. I know. Are you ready for that? No, but I don't think parents ever are. We could ask her to stay, keep her close. We could, but we won't. Why not? Because we didn't survive all that just to cage her. She's wild, like the mountains, like us. And wild things need to run. Elena leaned against him. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise, just old and tired. You're not that old. Old enough. They sat together watching the fire burn low. Outside, the town slept, and somewhere in the distance, the mountains stood dark against the stars. Still there, still waiting, still wild. But Caleb didn't need them anymore. He had everything he needed right here. Sarah left the next spring, headed west with a group of trappers who needed someone who knew the high country. She promised to write, promised to visit, promised to be careful. Caleb and Elena watched her go, stood on the porch of their house until she disappeared from view. It's just us now, Elena said. Yeah. Is that enough? Caleb turned to look at her. This woman who'd crashed into his life and refused to let him die alone, who'd fought beside him, survived with him, built a family from nothing. More than enough, he said. They went inside, and there, on the shelf above the fireplace, 4 wooden wolves ran together through a carved forest. A family, a pack. A reminder that some things, the important things, survive everything. Even the cold, even the fear, even the weight of the past. Love survives. Hope survives. And if you're willing to fight for it, to bleed for it, to choose it every single day, even when it's hard, life survives too. That's the story. Not of a man who chose the mountains, but of 2 broken people who found each other in the wilderness and learned that being alone was never the answer. Connection was. Community was. Love was. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't running away from pain. It's staying, opening your heart again, choosing to hope even when hope feels dangerous. Because life, real life, doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in the moments between, in the shared struggles, in the hands held through storms, in the promises kept even when keeping them is hard. Caleb learned that. Elena taught him. And together, they proved it was true. The mountains are still there, wild and beautiful and deadly, but they're not home anymore. Home is wherever love is. And for Caleb Rourke, that's enough. More than enough. It's everything.